Welcome to Breaking Indecision. Sometimes, our decision to plan the next best move doesn't always go as planned. What do we do in a world of chaos and overload of information? Do we do the right thing and still end up in the wrong place? From around the world, the Trilateral Strategic Steering Group is broadcasting a deeper dive into those questions that bring the how to the foresight on strategic decision making. Welcome back. Do we have an exciting episode for you today of Breaking Indecision? Our esteemed discussion hosts.
I'm Group Captain Arnaud Lenné. I'm the French officer in the UK team of the TSSG. So I'm working in London in the CSAF.
Hi, I'm Group Captain Chuck Norris. I'm the UK Exchange Officer here in CSAF Strategic Studies Group here in the Pentagon. I'm really excited to be interviewing General C.Q. Brown, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and getting his views on how he makes his decisions.
So good afternoon, sir. So on behalf of the members of the Trilateral Strategic Steering Group, I'd like to say thank you for your time. It's a great honor for us, for our group, to make this podcast with you. I know that your time is precious, so if everything is okay for you, I propose to move directly to the first question.
Ready to go.
So in September, you selected with your British and French counterparts the following problem statement: decision making in the post-information age. Sir, why does the problem statement matter to you, and for the USAF in particular?
Think about our day-to-day lives, much less what we do from a military standpoint, is the flow of information and how much information we get on a day-to-day basis, and the aspect of how we make those decisions. And as I had a conversation with someone earlier today, you can have loads and loads of information. How do you understand the validity of the information, where the information came from, and the aspect of the latency of the information as well? And so how all those things come together in this information age where you can be bombarded. And for those of us that fly, you know the difference between the real target and the chaff. The aspect of some of that information could be chaff, and the decision making is important to be able to figure out what is the real information that you need to be able to use to make decisions on versus the chaff that actually causes more confusion. And that's something that we collectively has to be able to do, not only from a airman standpoint, but it's how we use some of the information tools to be able to weed through some of the loads and loads of information that we expect to see in a highly paced conflict or contingency, or even operating day to day in the gray zone.
Really useful, and thank you for sort of highlighting that. If I can move on to the next question, really. I mean, you've had an incredible career, and you've held tactical, operational, and strategic level positions. What's your decision-making process been like throughout your career, and has it changed as you've gone from tactical to operational to strategic?
I think there's some things that have changed, but I think some things have stayed the same. And what I mean by that is, I am who I am, and so there's certain aspects of how I operate that haven't changed. But it's just the consequence of the decisions are larger as you move up from tactical to operational to strategic. The amount of information you have available and how long you have to process the information. From a tactical standpoint, you had a short amount of time, but the consequence is only me and my aircraft that I had to worry about, or the flight I was leading. Versus now at the operational and strategic level, I'm thinking about the entire United States Air Force, not just the Air Force, but my allies and partners. The thing I do focus on, which is no different from each one of these, there's a set of facts and assumptions for every decision. And the aspect here is those facts and assumptions change, and they could change very quickly, or they could change slowly. And the thing I have to think about is, as you make these decisions, how those facts and assumptions change, which may drive the decision that I make or don't make. The last thing I would actually say to this as well is, for all those levels, you can't wait till those. I could never wait till those perfect information. You had to respond and react to the information you have at the time to be able to execute in a timely manner.
I agree wholeheartedly. You are who you are, and that's intrinsically built in. I think it's the timeline that's the interesting bit for you, and as you say, the span of responsibility. So, no, that's really useful, sir. Arno, over to you for the next question.
A former Google executive said that we are currently the transition between the information age to what he calls the age of reckoning. In fact, the information age and the abundance of information made the world increasingly complex and difficult to navigate. In fact, he says that we are not weaker or stupider than our ancestors, but the world is more challenging than ever before, and we need to go through more trials, errors they did in order to solve a problem. Have you noticed these changes all along your career? And what do you see as the challenges and issues for these decision makers today and into the future, especially with regard to this overabundance of information?
As you talked a little bit earlier, it's just the access and amount of information that we have available. I didn't have an email address until I was a captain. Back 5 years in, I've been doing this for 38 years. So 5 years into my career, 5, 6 years into my career is when my first email address, and we had the internet. And we used to sit around and talk to each other, and we would actually have, deeper conversations in some areas. Now, if you have a question, we don't have to ask anybody. We just, go online, go to a search engine and figure out and try to get the answer. But it goes back to what is the validity of that information? And as I tell our airmen, you cannot believe everything you read on the internet. And that there lies part of the challenge of how many false flags or inaccurate information that potentially could be out there that could be posted that could either drive confusion, impact a decision. And think about the aspect of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is really based on data. And it's only as good as the data that you have available. If you have a flaw in the data, then the information you're going to get is going to be flawed as well. That's the challenge I think we're up against in this age that we're in today, is just the amount of information we have available and how it can either help decision-making or be a detriment to decision-making as military leaders.
Okay, do you think that we are making better decisions because we have got more information, do you think that we are well prepared to it?
No, I do think there's aspects of we're able to make better decisions faster because we have access to the information faster. We just talked about this here in our staff here not too long ago. Because of some of the tools we have, we can actually ask a question, crank through the data very quickly, and get an answer in just a matter of minutes. Well, before the staff would take 2 to 3 weeks cranking through, looking at spreadsheets, looking at information to be able to get there. So I do think we can make better and faster decisions. But, we've talked about the data in the past, and garbage in is garbage out. That's why you still got to have some level of confidence in the tools. And that's the part I think we all have to work through. As you work through some of these information tools, we have to have confidence in the tools. We have to build confidence in the tools. As we get the answers, we need to be able to validate those answers in execution. And as we do that, that helps us build more and more confidence in the tools that we are using to help us make those better decisions.
And in the subject we are speaking about the post-information age, what is it for you? Do you see that we are entering into a new age? What is your definition of this post-information age?
That's a good question. How would you define the post-information age?
The former Google executives speak about the age of reckoning. So for you, what is this post-information age for the U.S. Air Force?
Actually, I just had a conversation this past week about ChatGPT. Being able to use artificial intelligence to create written documents or in any aspect. And so is that the post-information age? Now you can use AI to actually generate a product for you by asking a question, say, give me an answer in this format, make it 500 words, and then be able to use that. That age of reckoning, I do think about the aspect of how that capability could be used and how we set the norms for use of that type of technology. Because think about it, as we've gone in various domains, as we've gone into cyber, as we've gone more so into space, the norms of behavior for using these types of capabilities and AI has not been well defined yet. And that's something I think we all got to be thinking about. And this may be the age of reckoning, the post-information age, is where you have tools that manipulate the information in a certain way and understanding what is authentic versus what is generated from artificial intelligence. I think that's going to be a challenge that we're going to have to deal with and understand going forward.
And do you think that all these tools will make your job easier?
I don't know. I think it's a little bit of both. It'll make it easier, but it can also make it harder.
Yeah, I think so.
There's many things that make our lives easier, but at the same time, they can make it harder in certain aspects. And I think it's easier because of it's going to be able to sort through data. The harder part now is those that may use it in areas where it's not, actual data, or it's used for nefarious reasons. That can make it harder. And to realize what is authentic. If I gave you a piece of paper with 500 words on it, and then asked you to tell me, did I write that or was that written by AI? Would you be able to? That's the part I think we're going to have a challenge with.
I think so. My daughter's history teacher has already had that challenge in a couple of essays that they've been giving her, to be quite honest. So, I mean, just following on from that a little bit, you mentioned a lot about AI. How much of the decision do you see AI potentially taking versus the human in the loop? How much do you see it as science and how much as art?
I honestly believe you still got to have a human in the loop. And so I think what the AI will do will help cull through and identify a series of options. You can cull down from 10 options down to 3 options very quickly based on some of the data and really, how you ask the question. But at some point, I think there's got to be a human in the loop that makes the final decision. And you don't necessarily want artificial intelligence to go all the way to the very end. That's the part I think we've got to think through of how it helps us make those decisions, but not let the AI make the decisions for us.
I think as you've already said, sir, the AI is so dependent on the data in. If we put the garbage in, we get the garbage out. So I think you're right. It's that assurance of the information and data we're getting from the AI to help us with that decision making. One of the other things we've spoken about, obviously, the TSSG being the trilateral status. What differences have you seen in making a national level decision, or one just solely for the USAF, and then one involving our allies and partners? How does that change the decision-making calculus?
Well, I think with every decision you're going to make, you're going to have certain restraints and constraints you have to work through. And with those, depending on whether it's things I get as for the United States Air Force, our Department of Defense, or our United States government, I would say the same thing as I work with our allies and partners. And in this trilateral form, you may have more leeway that I may not have. And so how do we adjust and then make a decision that's going to work for both of us? The thing I think about as I make decisions, I think of life as a Venn diagram in some aspects. I want to find some areas we can all agree on and really focus on those and move those forward. And there'll be some areas that we may have some different perspectives on, which I think the different perspectives are helpful. But there may be some areas where we have a difference of opinion. And that's the part that I think we can continue to work through and talk through. And because it may be just either a misunderstanding, different perspective, different priorities. And because of that, we may see the problem a little bit differently. But I think the key part is how do we start from the beginning, and what parts do we agree on versus let's talk about what we disagree about. That's, to me, is what's going to help us move faster in certain areas, particularly as you're making decisions internal to the United States, because we have those inside the United States that disagree on certain things. And I'd say the same thing in a trilateral environment as well.
And so, I mean, we've spoken about the information. I know how much of a supporter you are for integrated by design and pushing that sharing of information. How difficult do you see that in the trilateral situation we've got?
It's got difficulties. I mean, there's some positives, and I think the key part of any relationship is to continue the dialogue. And once we stop talking to each other, then the opportunity to move forward on integrated by design or anything other type of decisions we're trying to get done will cease. And so the continued dialogue. And I really believe that you have to get through the aspect of the challenges. And as you have those challenges, the more we talk to each other, the more we might figure out that it's less of a challenge than we thought. And it may be a cultural piece. We are fairly closely aligned, but there are some things that are different. And those are the things I think we have to think through. And the more we spend time to each other, the more we have a sense of how to pick up on some of those unique aspects and go, okay, now I see and understand why you may have that perspective versus the perspective I have, or why your nation looks at it this way based on some historical aspects, or it's a government priorities. That's the beauty of the dialogue, and that's why I think it's important that we keep dialogue.
So you say that it's good to know each other because it enables you to understand why French took this decision or not. But do you think that cooperation like this brings diversity, and through diversity you can improve your decision making as well?
The perspective that each one of our members bring into the conversation is important. I'll tell you, one of my goals, one of the things I try to do when I have a meeting is watch the room and watch the body language. And then from there, be able to pull people into the conversation. Because sometimes, particularly for some members, it's harder to speak up, particularly with us, that have a lot of rank on our shoulders or on our uniforms, have a harder time sometimes get our younger members to speak up. And we've got to encourage that because they have a perspective that we don't have some experiences that we don't have, and they're maybe closer to the problem than we might imagine. And so that's an important aspect as well, to be able to bring in that diversity of thought and diversity of culture into the conversation. What I'd offer for you, thanks for the TSSG for all the work you do. Continue the great work, and you got a pretty wicked problem we handed you this year. Think about how we do the decision making in this post-information age, but I'm confident that you'll be able to get there.